and subscribe right now, or this will be in your bed tonight.
Hello and welcome back to ProRevenge. Before we start, please scroll down and click like and subscribe. This means that you will get more content from me. Please like and subscribe as it will really make my day. Height approved. I originally posted this in r/malicious compliance, but I think it belongs here too. This isn't my story, but my parents'. It was probably the first time I witnessed malicious compliance, and I still remember it well. It was about 25 years ago, so I was about 8, and we had just moved into a 150-year-old house that was in need of major repairs. My dad, thinking ahead, knew he would need a large garage/workshop to really get started on the renovations properly. On the edge of our yard was an ancient barn that was falling apart and needed to be torn down. My dad figured this was the best place to build his new workshop, so that was the plan. We had met and were on good terms with all the neighbors at that point. When the plans for the new workshop were finished, my parents went around to all the neighbors as a courtesy to show them the plans and get their blessings. The neighbors whose property the current barn and new workshop would border, I'll call them the Peters, were concerned about the height. The existing barn was 16 feet high, and they asked if we could only build it 1 story, 12 maximum, as to not block the sun in their yard. Sure, no problem, my parents agreed. They wanted to go 2 stories for extra storage, but just 1 wasn't a deal breaker. So the old barn was torn down, and the foundation laid for the new one. During that time, there was a falling out with the Peters and my parents. I'm not sure what happened, but it turned nasty. One day, my brother and I were playing street hockey and Mr. Peters came out yelling at us, "Get off the road, you half-breed shits. My dad is black, so we are both half black. You have to earn your place in this town." Upon hearing this, my mom had to physically restrain my dad from going over and beating the living shit out of him. Eventually, he cooled off and started on his plan. The plans for 1 story went out the window. Soon, the new garage that was only supposed to be 1 story soon gained a 2nd in the blueprints. If they were going to direct racist comments at his kids, my dad would build what he wanted. As construction started, the Peters came over to ask why there was 2 stories being built and were told to go fuck themselves. We didn't hear from them again until the roof started to go on. The bylaws of the township limited allowed structures to 24 feet high. The Peters called the township and then a building inspector, claiming that the new garage was over 24 feet high. If it was over height, the entire thing would have to be torn down and rebuilt, costing us tens of thousands of dollars. I remember the Peters standing there, watching the inspector, with smug looks on their faces. 2 days later, we got the final report back from the township and inspector 23 feet, 11 inches, just as my dad had drawn up in his new plans. He sent me up on the roof of the garage, just plywood, no singles yet, with some spray paint, and had me write 23 feet 11 inches, height approved in 2-foot high neon orange letters across the entire roof, facing their yard and house. Not only did the garage block all sunlight from reaching their yard, but my dad waited until everything else was done before he shingled that side of the roof. They had to stare at those neon orange letters for almost 3 years. We didn't hear a peep from them for the next 10 years until they moved. Kick me in the balls. Say goodbye to your future. I'm 23 and August 2017 I was in a bar and I ran into an old friend. I was talking to her and she had my hand on my shoulder and we were flirty, etc. Her friend came out of nowhere and kicked me in the balls as hard as she could, for no reason. Apparently she's a mean drunk and thought I didn't know the girl I was speaking to and was trying to protect her. I hit the ground immediately and I couldn't breathe and everyone was staring at me and didn't know what to do. I was just dying on the ground for a few minutes when the bouncer basically dragged me out and the girl I was talking to was just apologizing. My balls fucking killed so much, so I immediately Ubered it to the hospital and turns out my left testicle ruptured, popped, from the kick. But since I went to hospital as soon as possible they were able to operate and save it, rather than having to remove it. But it is still going to have less functionality from now on. Obviously I was extremely pissed and I filed a police report, and thankfully the cops took it very seriously and got video footage from the bar, eyewitness accounts, statements from everyone including the girl who kicked me. The girl reached out to me numerous times and apologized, but I didn't care. I wanted her in jail. The police told me they've gathered enough evidence to charge her, and that due to the video and witness statements the charges will stick, but it will be up to the judge on how harsh of a punishment she will get. They suggested that she will get a light punishment because she's a straight A student, never been in trouble, parents are wealthy, and she has retained a great lawyer. Also she's a white 20 years old girl, so that plays a huge part. The cops recommended I just take a written and verbal apology from her, and her lawyer contacted me and told me she wants to become a teacher, so she won't be able to become a teacher if she has a criminal record, and he gave me her written apology in advance, hoping to sway my mind. I rejected all of this and pushed on towards charges. About 2 years later she was convicted, and she spent about 3 weeks in jail, paid a fine, and has community service, and most importantly she has a criminal record and now can't be a teacher. She contacted me many times before the charges were laid and begged me to drop them, saying she was just drunk and never hurt anyone before and it was a mistake, but she literally popped my ball for no reason and for that she had to pay. Mess with my kids. That's gonna cost you a pretty penny and get you in trouble with the law. So I've got an acquaintance, Richard, who has always been of the I know better than you school of thought. What makes it worse is that he literally received his PhD in physics from one of my country's top universities about 6 months ago, so he's not a dummy. The problem is that he thinks that because he's a physics genius, that means he knows better than everyone about everything. Just an example, my kids are in Montessori schools. This is a decision my wife and I reached together, and we are very happy with it. When he heard, he went on a 30-minute rant/lecture about how we are throwing our money away and Montessori is nonsense. When I told him that I had read and even professionally translated studies proving the opposite and gave him some real-world examples, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin, Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, etc., he still would not admit he might not be 100% correct. Not the subject of this revenge, but so you understand the person we are dealing with. Another thing that's important to note is that Richard does not have Asperger's or anything similar. We joke about this all the time, and he's been tested from here until next week. He's just a really smart, socially oblivious, pain in the ass. Given all of the above, I try to limit my time with him, but unfortunately, that isn't always possible, and last week we were both at the same group party for a friend, Jack, who was visiting back home from overseas. I've known Jack since grade school, so we brought our families and made it more than just a long time, no see type of thing. At some point later on in the afternoon my eldest, awesome, 10Y/0, came to me really sad and said she wanted to go home. When I asked her why, she said that Richard had just spent 15 minutes telling her that she shouldn't eat hot dogs because they are unhealthy, and he explained what went into hot dogs and what they are made out of. Awesome is not a vegetarian, knows that the beef and chicken she eats used to be live animals, and has never professed interest in vegetarianism. At the same time, when a kid is eating a hot dog, they don't care or want to know what's inside. We spoke a bit, I calmed her down, and I told her to ignore Richard and go play with her siblings and her friends. Being a kid, she was thankfully easily distracted by something else and moved on. I didn't want to make a fuss with Jack or with Richard, so I just let it be. This turned out to be a mistake. About 30 minutes later I heard Awesome scream and begin crying. I ran over to her. Richard had come up to her and knocked her hot dog out of her hand, saying she shouldn't eat that garbage. I handed Awesome over to my wife for damage control, and I took Richard aside and told him that A, you don't ever talk to a man's kids without permission, B, you don't ever teach a man's kids without permission, and C, you sure as shit don't ever touch a man's kids without permission. He doesn't have kids, so I still wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. This turned out to be a mistake. Instead of doing the mature thing and moving on, he decided to double down on the hot dog issue. This was the hill he was going to die on. My kids shouldn't be eating hot dogs. Keeping Jack in mind, I disengaged and told him to stay the fuck away from my family. For the rest of the RV I kept my eye on him, and he didn't come near them. Jack enjoyed. We all ate some good meat. End of the story as far as I'm concerned. This turned out to be a mistake. A few days later we received a visit from a child protection officer who claimed that we were neglecting our kids. Specifically Awesome. She came in and saw that while the house could have been cleaner, what house with kids is spotless? Everything was fine. She sat with Awesome for a few minutes and asked her some questions, said everything was fine, and left. First thing I did was call a friend of mine who is a lawyer, just to be on the safe side. He said it looked to him like we were in the clear, but we should keep in touch with him just in case. Next, I began working the grapevine. It turned out that Richard had been offended by how I treated him after the hot dog incident, so he filed a false anonymous report. Being Richard, and never thinking he could ever be wrong, he was even talking about it, as if people should be proud of him for what he did. I had to make sure, though, so the last thing I did, before dropping the hammer on him, was confronting him personally. I set my phone to record and went to his house. He doubled down yet again, saying we were torturing Awesome. He's the one who called protective services on us, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat. This turned out to be a mistake. I'm not the violent type, but I swear I wanted to break the son of a bitch in half. I told him that if he came near myself or anyone in my family again, I'd have a restraining order put out on him, and I'd make sure every single one of our shared acquaintances knew why. I listened to the recording in my car, and his admission that he filed a false report came out clear as day. I immediately forwarded it to my lawyer, who said he'll get the ball rolling with some friends of his with the public prosecutor to see if we could get Richard in trouble using his admission. Still waiting on that. The wheels of justice turn slowly sometimes. Then, I enacted my actual revenge. See, after he got his PhD, Richard bragged about the new flat he'd be moving into as soon as he sold his current flat. To that end, he renovated most of his current flat, including putting in lots of new and expensive features that required lots of electrical work. He did the same on his new flat. He did most of the electrical work himself, which is a big no-no unless you're licensed. I called in an inspector on both of his flats, who asked to see certification on who did the electrical work. Obviously, there was no certification. It wouldn't surprise me if, Richard being Richard, he began arguing with the inspector that his work was good enough and he didn't need to pay someone else to do it for him. I haven't seen or spoken to Richard since, but I've heard that he had to bring in a certified electrician to examine every single change he made in both flats. This meant dismantling everything and having it inspected. Turns out the buyers of his old flat weren't happy with the delay in receiving the keys, and were even unhappier when they learned why there was a delay. They walked away from the deal and are taking him to court. Because his sale fell through, he's now in the hole paying mortgages on 2 flats. I don't know if there was a fine levied against him, but I sure as hell hope so. Lesson of the story: you don't ever fuck with a man's kids. Thank you all for watching to the end of the video. But before you go, please like and subscribe for more. Not many of you at all that watch are subscribed or like the video, and this makes me unsure if I should continue to make more content or not. So if you want more content, please like and subscribe. If you don't want to miss out on any future videos, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button. Also, please give me some feedback in the comment section about what I can do better, because not many people comment on my videos, so I have no idea of people's opinions of thoughts about this YouTube channel. So yeah, that's all from me. If you have subscribed and liked the video, please consider sharing the video with your friends. Thanks and bye. I'm still doing daily uploads, so hope to see you in tomorrow's video. Bye.